Please welcome to the people of Penn State, Lillian Emlet. Lillian, how are you today?
Wonderful. How are you, Paul?
I am fantastic. You are joining us from Pittsburgh
Yeah.
today, where you live, work, and play. So
Yeah.
it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. This is super exciting.
So let's start at the beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
So actually, my parents signed me up for the 6-year combined undergrad to med school program with Jefferson Medical College back then. So that's actually how I started at Penn State. And I left the program and ended up staying a full 3 years at Penn State main campus at University Park.
Oh, that's great. As a student, what were you involved in while you were here?
Yeah, so, my memories, my most fondest memories are actually of resident life. I actually was an RA, and I loved being part of resident life. I also was part of the Asian American community, and there also was a dance troupe, like an international dance troupe, which I actually don't know if it's still, I don't know if these things still exist actually anymore. It seems so long ago.
What was the name of the dance troupe?
I don't remember. I do have somewhere in my things the little rainbow colored bag that we kept our shoes and our equipment in, but I feel like it was the Penn State's International Dance something.
Okay.
And we actually performed and we traveled. It was really wonderful because we got to dance different cultural dances. So I got to learn, for example, like Bhangra, like Indian dances, things I had never been exposed to before. But between probably that, the Asian American communities, and the resident life, those are my best memories of Penn State.
That's great. I'm sure it still exists in one form or another.
I'm sure.
But there are something like 30 dance troupes at Penn State now. So
Wow.
yeah, so it is exploded. There's every time you're walking across campus, there's either a dance troupe or an a cappella group or someone performing, and it's always in my case, it's always a new name of a group that's popping up. So
That's awesome.
when you came to Penn State, I mean, you said you signed up for the bachelor's to medical school program. So was becoming a doctor kind of always in the plans for you?
From my parents' perspective, yes. But for me, in high school, I wanted to be a writer. Um, and at the same time, I did most of the STEM and all of the science track, and I felt like that was my ticket to get out of rural Pennsylvania. So I went along with it. I think it's only now that I'm starting to come back to those dreams these many years later, almost, 40 years later, I'm actually rediscovering whether or not writing is something I'm going to add to my portfolio of identities.
This is the people of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Lillian Emlet. She is the founder of Transforming Healthcare Coaching. So Lillian, talk a little bit about your journey kind of in the first decade after you left Penn State and how you came into medicine.
Yeah, so after I left the combined program, I ended up saying I do actually want to go into medicine. Ironically enough, by the end of those 3 years, I went into the science major, the life sciences major at Penn State. So I wanted to stay really broad, so that I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. Initially, I thought I wanted to become one of those epidemiologists, actually pandemic hunters and like outbreak hunters. But in the end, ended up going to Jefferson in the graduate school program. So I went to Jefferson in Philadelphia, not in the medical side, but on the PhD side. And in the lab and doing only basic science, I realized I really miss people. And people, it made sense. I loved resident life. People are my thing. So I decided in the grad school program that I needed to pivot back towards medicine. And so I doubled down in studying for the MCAT and actually became an MCAT instructor for Kaplan in Philadelphia. Got in, and I guess the rest is history.
So you got back into it because you missed people,
Mm-hmm.
but you could have become a generalist. You could have become a family practice. What drew you to emergency medicine?
Yeah, so in medical school, I did enjoy everything. It was hard to switch every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks into something different. And when I thought about what I wanted to do, I really loved surgery, actually. I loved trauma and I loved everything about surgery. And at the same time, the hours were very long and it was very insular, like it was a very specific specialty. And then I started to realize, well, I like everything, and there's no reason to have to close off to only one type of practice. So then I felt that emergency medicine was the best of all of those specialties, primarily because 24/7, 365 emergency physicians everywhere around the world are there for you. And I liked the fact that just like family medicine, it did include children, women, adults, geriatrics, included everything. And it was as close to working with surgery as I could, trauma surgery as I could. So I really chose it primarily for the safety net of what it is in terms of caring for people in this country, and also just being able to handle anything.
Take us through like a typical day of an emergency physician. You said it's 24 hours, 7 days a week that you're on. What does the shift look like, and kind of what are you encountering?
I would say probably as an emergency physician, the most constant thing that happens is the fact that anything can change, and any day and every day is different. So I think if you're someone who may have ADHD or may love just the variety in life, emergency medicine is a specialty you should consider, primarily because you just don't know what the day will bring. It could be a really humdrum day with just very minor injuries, or cough and COVID, and flu, a broken bone, a laceration here and there. It really varies across the country where you practice and what the day will be for emergency medicine shift. And our shifts always change, right? So we're sometimes night shift, sometimes we're day shift, sometimes we're swing shift. And so I think the biggest thing about emergency medicine, if you love variety in life, and you are flexible, and you're curious, it's a great specialty. It's exciting. The teamwork is amazing. It's When I say 24/7, 365, it means that the door and the light is open somewhere. At some
Yeah.
urgent care, or at some emergency uh, department somewhere. There's someone, if you are injured, hurt, have a mental health crisis, there's a place that you can go.
So one of the things that's interesting about emergency medicine is that you are kind of the first, not maybe not the first person, but you provide that initial care, right? That initial kind of path to recovery, and then you might not always see the end of it, right? The patient might be transferred to another hospital. They might go to another set of doctors, and so kind of talk through, not knowing what the ultimate outcome might be in the situations of the patients that you're helping.
Yeah, so for emergency physicians, that is sometimes the one of the most challenging parts of the job. You hope you made the right diagnosis and set everything in motion correctly. Sometimes there's still uncertainty whenever you're done in the department and things have moved on. And at the same time, sometimes you don't always get the follow up, especially if you transfer out of the system or out of your hospital. And at the same time, I think most emergency physicians know that it's so important to set people the right access to care, and to begin the journey to either outpatient or inpatient specialists in the right timing, and also in the right order. It's funny you say that, because actually that's part of the reason why I ended up going into critical care, partly was because I actually was really curious, especially for the critically ill patients. I really enjoyed continuing that journey with the patient and actually stepping to what we call the other side, or upstairs inside the hospital, which is the intensive care unit. And so in emergency medicine residency, within the first year, I realized while I loved emergency medicine, I also really loved being that continuous presence for families and their patients um, in the hospital, to see them through the entire rest of the hospital stay.
So, from what I understand about critical care medicine, though, there isn't always a pathway into it, or like a way to train to go into it, or like established certification. So, what was your pathway into it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So surprisingly enough, and this is a shocking to whenever I tell people on the airplane, for example, someone who's not in healthcare, the degrees of silos and segmentation of access to training pathways, and how what it takes to become a subspecialist in healthcare. So critical care medicine obviously is the intensive care unit, or the ICUs. And this is obviously places that take care of respiratory failure, circulatory failure. And we have different devices that help keep people alive, whether they be ventilators or dialysis machines or extracorporeal membrane oxidation or ECMO machines. And most people only discover that we existed in the pandemic. For many people, fortunately, they never even knew what is the ICU really for. Other people experience this primarily because a loved one has had open heart surgery or some kind of major organ transplant or some other major trauma surgery. That's the other way most people previously knew about intensive care units in general. And so um, that move from uh, going that continuous level of care from the emergency department to the ICU are probably the most unstable and sickest patients that we have. And that was what was of interest to me whenever I chose that field. Back then, it is now probably a good 20 years ago now. When I was a medical student and when I was in residency, they were not a pathway for emergency physicians to then do an additional 2 years of critical care training. These pathways all exist now. Now, going to critical care, you can be coming from internal medicine, emergency medicine, anesthesiology, neurology, neurosurgery, and general surgery. There's all these specialties you can actually go into. Obviously, also, if you want to do a pediatric side of things, you can also do pediatric critical care. But back then, emergency physicians were one of the few specialties that were not able to do that. And so we, over time, had this such growing interest that the boards of the medical specialties began to collaborate and listen and compare, looking at our competencies, our training, our exposure, and we're able to finally create a pathway for us. And now we have multiple pathways for us to enter either critical care or neurocritical care.
So
Yeah.
when I look at your career, it has spanned, you talked about being on the PhD side and which is predominantly kind of the research side, right? And then the medicine side, right? The actual hands-on helping patients that are in front of you. And now you've gone to and probably for many years as a medical educator, right? Preparing the next generation
Mhm.
of physicians and healthcare professionals. What was it that drew you to the classroom?
So actually, our classroom is actually the simulation lab, my classroom. I don't teach the undergrad medical colleges. I actually teach residents and fellows, people who are in practice. So we call this graduate medical education. So in the
Okay.
clinical sphere, and also using simulation to practice before we actually do things in real life, ideally, especially for more rare procedures. There are many things that happen very infrequently in healthcare, which is great, except that you can not only lose skills and also you can be quite anxious before one of these really rare events, whether it be a procedure or resuscitation. And so I primarily use simulation to teach communication skills for delivering empathic communication to determine goals of care and palliative care. I teach interprofessional teams for how to do a resuscitation with greater clarity and precision. And I also teach high acuity, low occurrence technical procedures that are specific for emergency medicine and critical care medicine. And so that's actually just a natural sort of evolution of things I was tapped into by my own mentors that they were like, I think you should consider this. And so I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And then you start to fall in love with the education, the theory, and how people learn, how people incorporate the practice and continue to evolve and improve themselves.
Yeah, I guess as with anything, right? Whether you play a sport or you practice a trade, right? You have to practice, right? And you have to refine those skills so that when the time comes to perform, you're performing at your best, right? The same with these procedures that you're talking about, which might happen, 3 or 4 times a year, right? You want to make sure that you're ready for those 3 or 4 times a year when it might occur.
Right.
So I said the research, the medical practice, teaching, and then you decided to open a coaching consultancy called Transforming Healthcare Coaching. What led you in that direction?
So I always tell people this ironic fact about the pandemic actually saved my life.
Mm,
So, I'm in this journey, right, in academia, doing my thing as a associate professor in clinical simulation education, trying to churn out research papers, doing my work, being involved nationally. I had a full life. And at the same time, it's all about academic work.
right.
And so then when the pandemic happened, everything became simpler, right? We just took care of patients. We opened the COVID unit more than once. Things were very uncertain, and you became laser-like on just a single mission. And of course, I think just like many other people in the country, either suffered a significant loss or had an existential crisis of their own, wondering, is this the really way I want to live my life if these last couple months are going to be the way any of us get sick and die? And so while it was very meaningful to take care of the COVID ICU patients, I also realized that I was going through a divorce at the time. I was homeschooling because of course all the schools shut down in this country. And I was trying to figure out how in the world I was going to balance all of these other really important identities by myself and wonder what are all the other things I've left undone and never had thought about for so long in my career. And so I actually got a divorce coach, energy leadership empowerment coach. She helped me through that process. And in that whole entire year of that first year of the pandemic, to have all of these things happening to you made me realize, one, I thrived. Two, I was able to get through things. And three, I actually want to pay this forward. If other people could experience the power of coaching in healthcare, perhaps we wouldn't have burnout. And I started digging into the literature and sort of the different ways that coaching actually is currently being applied in both the business sector and obviously healthcare is a business. And then I realized I probably could do this. So I went back to school in the pandemic when everything was virtual. And I've now moved into from the solopreneur mindset into a entrepreneur mindset because I was able to find other healthcare professionals like myself who graduated from IPEC, or the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, one of the oldest coaching programs in the country, an ICF accredited training program. And we have a mission now to actually bring and democratize coaching to all healthcare professionals. So it's not just physicians, not just women physicians, there are many coaching companies who do cover just women physicians, or just executive leaders. But we really want to be a comprehensive place for anyone in their journey in their healthcare career. And we support physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs, PTs, OTs, pharmacists, social workers, anyone. If you identify as a healthcare professional and you feel that the stress of the industry is making your work life, career, whole identity, the way you're showing up, to be not in alignment for what you want, and you wonder whether you have other goals that you have set yet to achieve, that's actually what we're trying to help with.
So, I'm trying to think of how to formulate this question, right? Because when I think about coaching, I think it's sometimes misunderstood, right? So people look for mentors and mentoring. Sometimes they might look for help from a therapist or a mental health professional, right? And then sometimes they might utilize a coach to get them through things. How do you differentiate those three ways that people look to, get help and kind of improve as professionals?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I get that all the time so mentoring and advising and sponsorship. Those are sort of the three categories within the organizational workplace. So if you think about what a mentor does, a mentor actually has achieved the things you want. So for example, when I was in training, I looked to a faculty member who was already in the career pathway of being a clinician educator, and he mentored me to, this is how you get to the next step. These are the types of research projects or portfolios you should do. These are the teaching opportunities you do. So a mentor literally helps you, show you the things you have to do, and helps you in those projects so collaboratively to the point where you often publish together, you often are work groups together. And so that mentorship relationship is really important in your career advancement at work, whatever industry you're in. Advisors often are people you may find at the university, right? So anyone can be an advisor, right? And there are many advisors that are just pre-assigned to you, or just go to get some advice. Like, hey, I don't know about how do you switch into like a minor in whatever. And then you go to find an advisor and they'll help guide you through in terms of the pros and cons and the opportunities there. Sponsors in the workplace are a little bit different. Sponsors actually help as a peer collaborators or senior people at even a distant organization, because they know you through other committees or other national organizations. They'll actually recommend you for positions of power or promotion. So, for example, I just think of certain colleagues that I know of who really are interested in XYZ topic, and they're not even at my organization. But when in any kind of conversation or a newsletter or things like podcasts like this, you're like, oh, I'm looking for someone who knows something about XYZ. Well, I have a friend, and that person would be a great person to put as the chairperson of your committee. That's sponsorship. So those are all very career-oriented workplace guidance, which are really important to have on what we call the board of directors for your academic life or your professional life. On the other hand, therapy versus coaching gets very confused because we often see as coaches, we belong to the side of what positive psychology with Martin Seligman, where you often look at people who want to achieve things and how do you, it's the science of sort of achievement and the science of the psychology of goal attainment as compared to therapy, which is really about harmonizing, healing, and looking backward into the things that have happened to us, reconciling the trauma and integrating that into your current identity. So the easiest way to say it is therapy is looking back and healing. Coaching is either time limited or ongoing, and it's always goal focused. And so we're always trying to hold you accountable, have you understand yourself so that you can actually figure out what you need to do next. And you actually do all the work. I mean, obviously in therapy and coaching, you do all the work as the individual, as the client. It's just that we have a different trajectory. So we are always in some ways moving forward only. Some people need both coaching and therapy simultaneously for time limited periods of time. Some people only need coaching and some people only need therapy. I don't know if that helps clarify.
No, I think it's makes it very clear. And to your point, I have used an executive coach in my career, and you're right. They don't provide you with the answers, right?
Yep.
They just know the questions to ask to help you define your own answers, right? Because they can't come. The coach can't come to the situation with a plan for you, right? The plan for you has to come from how you answer the questions that they're prompting you on. And then there's this, the pathway that's lined with accountability, right? I mean, Paul, this is what you said you wanted to do, and this is the kind of professional you said you wanted to be, right? How are you working towards that? So,
Right.
yeah,
It's really interesting too, because, as I entered into the training and realized how much it was related to questioning and exploring and unpacking, I realized there's a lot of similarities in terms of the teaching pedagogical things that I had already encountered in debriefing and simulation education, because teachers often do this in a guided way as well in their education and training for how do you guide different levels of learners to find for themselves the answer, because the worst thing a teacher can do is just to spoon feed you and you never become a lifelong learner yourself. And so in many ways, coaching is a similar, and yet it's also it can hold emotions a little stronger compared to in the teaching environment. But yet I can tell you, because I teach such high stakes things, I have to hold emotions too, because it makes people very uncomfortable sometimes to be learning the things that they're doing in the simulation lab because it feels so real. So I do think you are all right. It's all about the questions. And I never thought I'd be such a question asker.
So, what are some of the common issues that healthcare professionals face that can be solved with coaching?
Yeah, so it really varies. A lot of times people come just because they're stuck. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me, and I used to be happy in my career, but something is not right. I've stagnated. And I just don't know where I need to go next. So they come for exploration. My most common clients are actually people who've just being promoted or just moved into a new leadership level, and this is a bit overwhelming to realize they now have a whole new other identity of being seen as a leader, and so they're no longer a peer, and so it's sort of awkward in terms of how do you navigate that, and now you have even more worlds of places you don't know the content, right? You're learning as you're learning on the fly to some degree, your leadership position. Other people come to our company at least for pre-burnout or burnout recovery, because they realize I am burnout and I got to do something for myself. And thank goodness they actually finally do something for themselves, because I mean, you have to heal from burnout. It's either that or you leave the profession, which is a horrible shame in general. And there are definitely lots of other resources, employee assessment programs. And then eventually at some point, sometimes people find us for burnout recovery, primarily because it's an ongoing journey. And sometimes those employee assistance programs only cover, a time limited amount of coverage. And they realize, oh, I actually need even more ongoing work to be able to achieve what I really want to do, which is become a writer, climb Mount Everest, do something else. And so that's when people begin to find us. Other times are career transitions. So other things for many nurses, there are many other sort of lateral positions in healthcare research, quality improvement, her health coaching. There's so many different other opportunities for the nursing profession that to gain clarity on, well, what might be interesting or worth it for them, they need some assistance just in that time frame for career transitions. Executives come primarily because, as you know, as an executive yourself, it feels lonelier at the top. The closer the board of directors you have, those really big in the beginning of your life, slowly get smaller the higher up you go, because there's just so many things you cannot really tell anyone, especially when it relates to budgets and stress and your emotions. You always have to have a degree of forward facing calmness and decorum that you're not sure who you can trust anymore. And there's only a few people at the top, right? So most executive leaders have always had some degree of coaching intermittently or continuously for the last probably decade of their entire career, because it is just natural and normal when you're in those circles to have a personal private confidence that's highly confidential, because we have the same code of ethics like a physician does. You can't actually disclose anything unless there's a suicidal tendency. That's state reportable. Other than that, everything is highly confidential. So those are the variety of different things that people come to us for coaching.
Yeah, I think early in my career, I would find coaching through what we would describe as our like own personal board of directors, right? A group of friends that you've acquired over the years, through professional conferences, through colleagues that
Right.
you've worked with. And what I learned through using an executive coach was that the executive coach will tell it to you like it is, like that they will be very direct. Where people who are in your kind of personal board of directors, right? You come to care for them and you come to be friends, and you might soften things a little bit, and might not be as direct as you might need. And so what I've learned is I liked that kind of the professionalization of this process, or of this industry.
Right. And not only that, I think the interesting thing, because I still have a coach, right? I still actually coaches have coaches,
Right.
and to be able to survive in business and to be able to actually perform at your highest level, it would be interesting to not have one, because if you're goal driven and you're always trying to get there better and faster, it is really helpful to have someone just to always be that sort of third neutral questioner to really unpack and examine that you don't have pre-associated biases. And I think what you're also talking about is not just the friendships, and your collegial professional relationships with people nationally, internationally. It's also just good to have a cross check of yourself, because we often tell ourselves things that, oh, that's not possible. How do you know it's not possible?
Right.
Show me the data. Do you have prior experience with this? Have you ever been in a situation? Okay, great. So have you ever not been in a situation before like this? Yes, I have. How did you get yourself out of there? Oh, I actually did XYZ. Oh, would that be applicable here? Yes, it could be. And so you start to realize it's funny when you're in your own zone, just performing and doing all the things you're excellent at, you need someone else just to cross check you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the other thing that jumped out at me about your practice was, you hear about leadership coaching, you hear about executive coaching, um, but you are a certified energy leadership coach. And so, what does how do you coach energy? How do you coach effort? Just kind of take us through how that may be differentiated between other types of coaching methods.
Yeah. So the energy leadership coaching comes from the IPEC, where we all trained, the Industry for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And really, it's more a holistic way of sort of seeing how you show up in the world. And from there, in that lens, you can sort of decide for yourself where and how you want to show up given the circumstances you're in. And so the best way to explain is to sort of talk a little about the 7 levels of energy. So level 1 is what we call victim or healing. So for example, if you've suffered a trauma or something really bad has happened or you're sick, you need to go into level 1. Level 1 is sort of hibernation, healing, not able to really just be. Like, you just need to step out. You need to step out and just go into yourself. Level 2 is the first step of moving away from just being in your own head, being in your own place. If you're like an animal that goes off to hide, to heal, to before it can come back out, you get angry. So if you think about things that happen, like, that doesn't go your way, you sometimes often first retreat, and then you're like, that's not right. I don't think that's the way it should be. And you get a little bit irritated or angry. And anger is actually a good emotion and a good thought to have because it actually drives you to propels you to be like, no, I'm not going to do this. And this is actually how we get advocacy, how we get mother against drunk driving. This is how we get organizations to rise up and do things. So anger is not a bad thing. Level 2 energy is not a terrible thing. The next is level 3, which is, things aren't perfect, things aren't great, and also I'm just here to survive. So I'm just sort of fine. Fine is level 3. When you ask them like, how are you doing today? I'm doing fine. It's average. It's just the next step of getting into higher levels of energy. Level 4 is where most healthcare professionals want to be because when they remember why they went into the caring profession, they actually love caring for people and they have energy to care for people. They give empathically. They actually are very present. They're creative. They're in their flow state. So level 4 for many people in the caring industry is where most people actually feel really good. Philanthropy, volunteering, food banking, like all these things are level 4 energy. Level 5 is actually seeing an opportunity. So even amidst bad things happening, I'm sure you probably have this even in your own groups. There's someone hopefully on your team where you're like, well, we literally lost the entire, I don't know, budget line, or we like this totally didn't work, or something canceled. And someone in the room, most people will get really either angry or, like just become quiet or something like, great, here we go again. This is just the fine level. Then you'll have like one person in the room who's level 5, like, well, you know what? There's probably an opportunity here that we can actually now finally do that pivot we wanted to do all along to go into, I don't know, creating this podcast, for example. So there's someone out there who sees even sort of theoretically bad things, the majority experiences as maybe an opportunity. And then really is really very non-judgmental about what's happening. It's like, oh, okay, so it's happened. Let's just move on and let's see how we can capitalize it. Sort of like the making the lemonade out of lemons attitude. Level 6 and 7 become much higher. Level 6 and 7 becomes where we start to incorporate our spirituality and our willingness to be present and mindful and have abundant love for not just ourselves and our family and sort of expand boundaries into, well, I actually care about my community. I'm one with sort of everyone that I can identify with, and that I'm really so abundant with everything that I can actually want to give at that level. And it's not often that you can find people up in operating at the level 6 level, and level 7 is sort of like the one with spirituality, the world, and your inner being. And so some people describe these times to be sort of when you're either on your yoga mat or when you're with your child or when you're in nature and you're just being. And so when we think about ourselves and how we show up, we can see how we are different in different situations with different people and with different areas of our life that we want to have better, right? So we actually have something called the Wheel of Life, where we actually also with our clients in the intake process have them really think and evaluate, like, how are you with your health? How are you with your relationships? And when we talk about relationships, your professional ones, your romantic ones, your family ones, new ones. And then we talk about career, we talk about all the different areas of your life and sort of think about, well, is there places you want to go to try to improve? And then with strategy that you obviously create yourself, we can have you energetically showing up with more abundance in that framework of the 7 levels of energy. And we have a proprietary assessment tool. So the IPEC has had psychological testing on their energy leadership index. And so that ELI is used for the initial intake with our clients to give them a snapshot in time. And it's a snapshot. And how you are showing up right now in this particular day. And then after coaching, we always see improvement in usually about 6 months. We can see a significant improvement, even better at 1 year. But in 6 months, you can begin to sort of see a tiny bit of change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to the pandemic, 2020, 2021, and I would say that our team here at the Alumni Association lived at level 5, right? Because yes, after we got through the other levels to get there, right? We saw opportunity, right? Opportunity to transform, opportunity. You mentioned to start a podcast like this. I mean, we would, if we were coming to work every day and didn't have the opportunity to slow down and see the opportunity in front of us, we wouldn't be doing some of the things that we're doing today. And it's finding that time that and kind of recognizing the situations that you could say, okay, there's opportunity. Like this might seem like the biggest crisis we've ever faced, but
Mhm.
how can we take advantage of the crisis, if you will?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things we also try to tell people, it's okay to be in level 1. There's a reason why you're feeling that, and everyone goes to level 1 too. Like, if you didn't go to level 1 too, because everyone gets very upset when they see their first score, it's like, "What? I don't wanna be like that." I'm like, "Well, it's actually sort of necessary." So you have to appreciate every level for where it's at. You can't stay in there too long. You have to figure out how to get yourself out of it, and at the same time, it's really important, so that you can show up in different ways for level 3, 4, 5, 6.
This is the people of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Dr. Lillian Emlet. She is the founder of Transforming Healthcare Coaching. Lillian, if people are interested in learning more about the work that you're doing or even utilizing your services, how would they find that information?
Yeah, so if you want to get to know us, we're at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com is our website. We do have a YouTube channel for a video podcast. And so I think that the best way for most healthcare professionals is to see and listen to us, just like this podcast. So on YouTube, our handle is transforminghealthcare.coach. And so also, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. But then transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. You can find our coaches, you can find our 5 coaches and see little videos of us. And we actually talk mostly on our podcast and have guest interviews. So if you have anything you want us to cover, please email us at podcast at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. And then to contact me, it's hello at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com.
Excellent. It's funny. I mean, it's funny. By the way, for those who are watching on YouTube, we are scrolling all of those handles in the website on the bottom so you can see. We'll also have those in the show notes. But I'm looking at your setup, right? And you've got the right camera angle, you've got great lighting. I'm like, this is not an accident. Like she does this. She does this. So it's good to learn about the video podcast that you do. It explains a lot about how jealous I am of your setup. I'm here with sun coming through the back and here in my office at the Hintz Family Alumni Center. So maybe I need to up my game a little bit too.
Well, I don't know, but see, for me, I think it makes it look very like I'm back. I'm having a moment where I feel like I'm in State College, right? So I think that's the good thing. It makes it feel very real and authentic, which is nice compared to a little bit maybe too curated or polished.
Well, talking about real and authentic, we like to get a little real at the end of each podcast where we have our lightning round. And so I'm going to throw a couple quick hitters at you. You just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
How about your favorite class at Penn State?
I don't remember. It's so long ago. I mean, I do remember where I met one of my really good friends, and we still see each other all the time. She was in my wedding. Hmm, but I don't remember. I have to pass on that one. Is that
All
terrible?
right.
So
How about
terrible.
your favorite Penn State moment?
Huh. Whenever we had that snowstorm, that big, like we shut down the state
Yeah,
snowstorm, and
yeah,
I was living right on center, and it was right next to the library, and we just had snowball fights. I just would watch. I would just sit and watch everyone having snowball fights. It was the best when the world just sort of shut down because of snow, and it was so beautiful and peaceful.
absolutely. We were in school at the same time, and that blizzard was a significant part of my memory as well. I mean, classes canceled for a week, and college students looking for something to do, right? And so,
Yeah,
um,
it was
yeah,
awesome.
it was a perfect storm in a number of different ways.
Right, right. Yep.
You mentioned that you have your own podcast. Who's your favorite person that you've interviewed?
Huh. I guess I will have to say the one that is just going to release next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that one's going to release next week, but I think by the time this airs, I think this will already be out. And actually, it's the chief wellness officer for the University of Tennessee. And I'll
Oh, wow.
just show you her book. So she just had a book on how do you feel. She actually is a psychiatrist who only specializes in undergrad students and healthcare professionals and healthcare workers. And so she is the chief wellness officer at University of Tennessee. And this is part of her book launch tour, I suppose, to being on our podcast this month.
So if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Michelle Obama.
And where would you take Michelle? I'm assuming you'd take her to Pittsburgh. Where in Pittsburgh would you take her?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of there's a couple new restaurants now that I actually haven't had a chance to try, but I probably would take her to a sushi restaurant or an Asian
Okay.
fusion restaurant. One of the couple that are open. Um, and then depending, I guess, on what she felt like doing, it also might just be fun just to walk around like sort of the strip district with her because we have a whole new like there's a Asian galley sort of style where it's a little bit more open. It's very casual, nothing fancy. Just
Sure. No, I love the alternative though, because you usually get the strip district from Annie Brothers, right, with the loaded sandwich, and so I like the alternative, uh, idea of how you would show Michelle Obama,
yeah.
Pittsburgh. What is your most unusual "We Are" moment? A time where you saw a Penn Stater and you yelled out "We Are," or they recognized you as a Penn Stater and you got the "We Are" from them?
I don't know if that ever happened to me like on the street. But I feel like it's actually on Facebook. And so I think it's really interesting. I think along the years, it's surprising who you realize there's a lot of Penn Staters around. Like you just meet other moms at the school,
Right.
like that type of thing. And you're just like, oh, you post something sort of a little bit pro Penn State, and then you're like, you get a whole bunch of people come out of the woodwork. So for me, actually, it's been on Facebook. All these people I didn't realize were also alumni.
That's awesome. How about your favorite Penn State sport?
Gymnastics.
Gymnastics. Excellent. And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
That's easy. Peachy Paterno.
Peach. All right. Well, Lillian, we want to thank you for joining us on the People of Penn State. It's Penn Staters like you who allow us to share your story with the world that elevates and adds value to every Penn State degree. And for that, we're truly grateful. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I also want to thank our producer, Vincent Longaro, our guest relations specialist, Abby Clark, and for you, our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not a member yet, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks again for listening and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are